Welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. There are no traffic jams along the Extra Mile when you're studying for your bar exam. And now, your host, Jackson Mumey, owner of the Celebration Bar Review.
Well, hey everyone, welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. This is your host, Jackson Mumey. I'm so glad you're with us for episode 129. Today we're going to be looking at study strategies, continuing our series that we've started a couple of weeks ago. And we're going to be looking at part 3 today that I've titled Passion and Vision. So I hope you'll stick around for that discussion. Now, I'm really glad that you're with me today. I know that many of you are getting ready for the February exam, if you're listening to this about the time that we've released it. And that means you're about 30 days to the bar exam. This is a pretty significant period of time for people, and obviously a time when there's a lot going on. So I really appreciate the fact that you're taking time out of your busy study day to be with us. If you're planning to study for the July 2017 or later exams, I'm also glad that you're with us. These are great tools, I think, for you to have, information that will help you as you prepare. I want to also offer you an additional tool, and that's a free masterclass, a webinar that we're offering this Thursday. That will be January 19th at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific time. The webinar is titled How to Make the Next Bar Exam Your Last Bar Exam. We'll look at the 4 steps that passing bar takers follow, and this is just filled with information that you can use, that you can take with you right away and put it to practice, and it's built on years and years of experience with literally thousands of students. Now, this masterclass is completely free, but you do need to register, and you can do that in one of a couple of ways. You can go to our website at celebrationbarreview.com. You'll see a button on the front page there that allows you to enroll, and just go ahead and fill that in and you'll be all set. If you prefer to text your registration, you can do that by texting the phrase "Next Bar Exam" to the number 33444. Again, text the phrase "Next Bar Exam" to the number 33444, and we'll get you registered that way, and then see you Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern. If for some reason Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern doesn't work in your schedule, or you just can't wait that long, I invite you to join us for the on-demand version of this same material. And you can register for that by going again to our front page at celebrationbarreview.com. Just scroll down the page a little ways and you'll see the link for the on-demand webinar. Click on that and you can schedule a time that works for you. You'll get the same great information and the same terrific offers. Of course, I really believe that the magic happens live, but I think you'll love it either way, and I really encourage you to join us and find out those 4 steps you have to take in order to pass the bar exam. Well, one of the steps that I talk about in that webinar is this idea of having the right passion and the right vision, particularly here at the end. And I want to speak very specifically to those of you that are planning on taking the February exam, because I know that with 30 days to go, it's easy to lose energy. You tend to feel yourself just running out of steam. If you've been cramming, you're probably bleary-eyed and more than a bit irritable, and certainly just not feeling it at this point. And that's pretty common. We talked in episode 128 about why it was important to not panic and sort of the problem that comes up at about 40 days until the bar exam. If you haven't listened to that one, I really encourage you to go back and check that out. And in episode number 127, we started this series talking about the fact that the house always wins. You can't brute force and just push your way through the exam. So when you hit this 30-day point, it feels like for a lot of people they're hitting a wall. They just don't know where to go and how to give themselves that last push. And so I want to share with you today some specific strategies to help you get through that 30-day wall. And I'm going to break them up into 2 broad categories. I think in order to be successful at this stage of your study, you need 2 things. You need passion for what you're doing, but you also need vision for what you're trying to accomplish. And without both of those, studies ultimately become less productive and less fruitful. Well, let's jump into a discussion of what I mean by passion. And essentially, I'm talking about fueling your study with this element of passion, having the passion that drives you to work through the lack of sleep and the lack of friendship and the lack of a life while you've been going. It's that point when you just begin to believe, is it ever going to be over? And oh my gosh, I just don't know how I'm going to get from now until the exam day. It's been my experience that when people have a big goal, a big reason, a big win at the end that they can see, that's in sight, they will do amazing things. They will push themselves beyond what they thought that they could do. And you might be saying to yourself, I just got to pass the bar. Well, I get that. But why do you have to pass the bar? What is it you want to do when you pass the bar? Now, in our special masterclass, I talk about this, and I ask this question, and I want to ask it of you today, and then I want to share some answers that other people have given us through our webinar, but I really want you to answer the question for yourself. And here's the question: how would passing the bar change your life? If you pass the bar in the next exam, how would that change your life? And I want you to treat that question seriously, because it has a lot to do with the kind of passion that you're going to bring to this exercise. Now, if you're listening and you can just stop the podcast for a moment and just try and formulate an answer, I think that's a great idea. But either way, I want you to hear what other people have said. We've asked this question of literally thousands of bar takers, and the responses are really remarkable. And I want to just share a few of them with you. One person wrote, "It would give me financial security to take care of my family." Other people wrote, "I'd be able to help others. It would allow me to help my community." Someone else said, "It would allow me to move near my aging parents and practice law." Another student wrote, "It would change my life. It's my life dream and forever goal. I would be doing what I love, and I would be making money." Many people said it would allow them to pursue their career goals. "It would be a goal that I set for myself that I need to complete, and if I don't, I'll never be able to settle for anything less." That's pretty poignant, isn't it? Not passing is not an option. A lot of people said and commented about the greater independence and greater opportunities it would give them. And a lot of folks responded that it would allow me to follow the legacy of my family members. I'd be the most educated person in my family. It would be a role model. I would be a role model to my children. It would restore my honor and social status. I'd have different options for work. I'd set an example for my children. Yeah. It would open doors for me. It would give me the opportunity to start working and begin to help the people that I want to help. And a lot of people said, I could pay my debts faster. I'd have more financial options. It would give me the chance to do the kind of work I know I can do. It would allow me to be qualified for the jobs I actually want. It would change my life by providing economic stability, helping others, and obtain a goal not yet met. Well, there's a lot more that people have said about what their reasons are. Everyone's got their own reason and their own way of articulating it. But notice what comes through very clearly in those comments. There is real passion behind why people want to pass the bar. Now, when I've asked this question, occasionally I get a response that comes back during the webinar and somebody says, I don't actually think it would change my life at all. And it's interesting. I've tried to track and follow those people a bit. And what I discover is that most of them don't take the exam, or they take it and they fail it, almost invariably. I actually can't come up with a person who said it wouldn't change my life at all that I followed through and found that they had passed. You see, I think if you don't have a reason, a why behind doing this, if you're just doing it because it's the next step on the treadmill, it's not very motivating. And ultimately, given the difficulties of the bar exam, the challenges of the test, it's simply not something you can do kind of as a hobby or lazy or not with much energy behind it. And certainly in this last 30-day period, if you don't have much energy, it's going to be tough to get there. So the reason I asked the question about why are you doing this and why it would and how it would change your life, I think is really to help you begin to get the motivation at the end to find the energy. Now, some practical ways you can do that. Well, I think definitely writing down your why and how it would change your life would be helpful for many people. But many of you are visual as well as auditory or literal or readers. And for you, I would recommend something called a vision board. It's very simple, really. Just go to your local grocery store or Walgreens or wherever, or Walmart, buy a poster board, the kind that kids use in their school projects. bring it home and take some pictures and some words that really help you identify and visualize what it would look like when you're a member of the bar. It's sort of the equivalent of people who are on a diet putting pictures of skinny people on their refrigerators. You know, it really helps motivate you that this is what I want, not that chocolate candy bar that's in the refrigerator. And now you're all thinking about chocolate in the refrigerator. But to bring it back to the bar exam, when you've got those pictures and those words, they help really drive your focus and your attention. Now, I put my vision boards all around my desk in my office. I put them behind my computer so that I'm constantly looking at them as a way that helps me understand why I do the work that I do. So that when I'm tired and tired of talking with students, for example, I see the difference. I see pictures of former students in those moments when they've passed and they're getting sworn in, and I know that I've helped change their lives. In the same way, you can start thinking about how it would change your life. When you do that, I think what you'll discover is that you begin to rekindle the passion. Have you ever been around a 1L since the days that you were a 1L, or maybe you go back and remember your own time? I remember as a 1L, I couldn't shut up talking about the law. I mean, I drove my family and my friends crazy. And eventually I began to realize, particularly as I went into teaching, that really no one else cared quite the way a 1L cares about the law. But you remember that passion and enthusiasm and excitement you had for law, the reason you went to law school in the first place? Well, I think sometimes in the studying for the bar, we begin to lose sight of that, and that's really a shame, because that should be the thing that's driving you right now. So I guess the way that you develop passion, in my view, is that you ask yourself, why are you doing this? Beyond just, I need to pass the exam, but why do you need to pass the exam? And how would passing change your life? The more that you can picture your post-bar exam life, I think the better off you'll be. And I think the more passion that will create, the more energy that will create for you in your studies. And it's really the boost sometimes that you need at this 30-day point. Now, to be clear, when you get within a couple of weeks of the exam, I liken it sometimes, this is not a great analogy, but I liken it to the Death Star in Star Wars. You know, the tractor beam is pulling you into the exam in the last couple of weeks. You've got plenty of motivation at that point. But right now, as you sit out 30 days until the test, it is sometimes difficult to find that motivation, and this is one of the ways that I think you can do it. Another way that you can generate passion for yourself is to be curious. Think back to what it felt like when you first started to study the law, or you first started to study for the bar exam, the things that you didn't know but wanted to know. Rekindling that sense of curiosity, that desire to learn, that willingness to learn, is absolutely vital. If all you've been doing is memorizing and reciting, then really you've lost that sense of curiosity. And I've spoken a great deal about this idea of memorization and why it doesn't work and why it's not good. But here's another reason to add to the list. It kills curiosity. It simply becomes a mechanical step when you're memorizing, and it completely eliminates your innate desire to learn, to be curious, to solve problems. See, I think most of us went to law school. We pursued a career in law because we wanted to solve problems. I don't know what kind of problems. I don't know what side of the equation you're coming out on. But ultimately, I think it's because we want to be problem solvers. Well, if all you're doing is memorizing and reciting elements of law, there's absolutely none of that sense built into that. And so as you lose your curiosity, you tend to lose your passion and your enthusiasm. And when you lose your passion and enthusiasm at this stage of your studies, you tend to have less effective, less productive study. It simply becomes drudgery. And at the point that it becomes drudgery, it's really not very effective in terms of helping you actually pass the exam in just a few weeks. So that's the first step. I think you've got to create passion. I really encourage you to do that mind question, if you would, of how passing would change your life, and then put it into action. Put it in a vision board, put it in a letter, do some things that you can put in front of yourself. Look, if you don't want to use words, go to pictures. There are lots of great pictures on the internet. Cut them out and put them up on your vision board, but do something that will give you a way to really focus on what you want. Well, I said that there were two elements to this. The first was passion, but the second is vision. And you might say, why would you combine those two things? I mean, if you're passionate, what does that have to do with vision? It's been my experience that when people lose sight of what they're trying to do, When they lose the enthusiasm for it, that's one problem. But you could be very enthusiastic and doing the wrong thing, having the wrong vision, and end up with a bad result. And so you have to combine passion with proper vision. Now, to think about vision, I think that there are a couple of things that you do want to have a vision for, and a couple of things you don't want to have a vision for. So let me break it down that way. What don't you want to have a vision for? What don't you want to focus on at this stage of your studies? 3 things. First, absolutely you don't want to focus on trivia. I am constantly amazed, I think, even at this many years, after 25 years of doing this, but it never ceases to surprise me how totally caught up in trivia bar takers become at this stage. There becomes this sense that if a certain word or a sentence or a line is incorrect, or they don't understand it, that single word, that single line, that single sentence will be the difference between passing and failing the exam. And I have to tell you, I've looked at the results of, I think at this point, probably 10,000 or more students over the years, and I can't recall a time when that was true. Not one. You see, I think it's just an innate and basically irrational fear that you have to know everything to be successful. And when I see students getting their focus on trivia instead of big picture, I find that they become less productive, they become less effective, and frankly, they lose the passion that we talked about as well as the vision. Look, there are going to be things you don't understand. There are going to be mistakes in your materials. There are going to be questions that seem unanswerable or undecipherable to you. There are explanations from the bar examiners in questions that just don't make any sense. That's just the way it is. And while I'd love it if the world were perfect and everything made sense and all the pieces fit together, that's not the way law works. And so when people get caught up in the trivia, they really end up fixating on that. They grind their gears on it. And I can tell you that every exam, we have people who get so locked up in the trivia that they become so frustrated and so angry over trivial matters that they really lose sight of what it is they're doing. Now, I think that this is an escape mechanism for some people. I think it's a way of blaming everybody else for the fear that you might not pass the exam. Oh, if the bar examiners hadn't written that awful question, or my bar review had given me a better course, or my law school had done a better job of preparing me, or the kids wouldn't have been bothering me, or my computer would have worked better, or ExamSoft would have had their software working better, or the guy next to me wouldn't have been chewing and smacking his lips, I would have passed the bar. Okay, maybe. But you know what? If you're doing all of the right things, you get way past that, and none of those things ultimately matter all that much. I'm a big football fan, and as we're recording this, there have been the playoffs in the National Football League, and often I'm struck by how teams will say, you know what, we lost on the last play of the game, but really we should never have been in a position to lose on the last play of the game. In other words, don't fixate on one play or one bad call from the referee. Think about the entirety of the game, and I think that's really what I'm saying here. Think about the entirety of your studies. Don't get locked up in trivia. And so if there's something that's bothering you in your studies, wherever you're studying, just let it go. It's just not that important. And I know that that sounds like heresy to some of you, because I can hear some of you saying as you're listening to this, he doesn't understand, I have to know everything. No, you don't. You really don't. And when you put yourself in that position, what you're basically saying is you're going to fail because you won't know everything. And because you don't know everything, then you're giving yourself permission to fail. And I think that's a huge mistake. So don't focus on trivia. In the same way, don't focus on the things that irritate you. Look, if you don't like your bar review, then don't focus on your bar review. If you don't like who you're studying with, then don't focus on them. If you don't like what's going on in politics around you, then don't pay attention to it right now. In other words, don't focus on the things that irritate you. If I irritate you, turn me off. It's okay, really. Whatever it is that's irritating you, shut it down, turn it off, but don't put your focus there. And one of the things I see with bar takers at this stage is that they're looking for a fight. They are just looking to pick a fight with almost everybody, whether it's the barista at their coffee shop, or it's the checkout person at their grocery store, or it's their bar review provider, or it's the person parking their car, or whatever it is. I mean, it just doesn't matter. Family, friends, doesn't make a difference. Look, there are plenty of things to be upset about and plenty of things to be irritated about, but they'll all still be there after the bar exam. And so you can safely set aside all of that. I think there's a lot of things to be irritated about these days. However, the most important thing right now is for you to be focused on passing the bar. And you can't do that if you're spending all of your time being scattered and disrupted by these minor things. And truthfully, most of them, not all, but most of them are pretty minor. Don't let those things get in the way. Don't put your vision on the things that irritate you. Put your vision on the things that are better, and we'll talk about those things you should focus on. The last thing I don't think you want to focus on in terms of vision, and this one will surprise most of you, is I don't think you should focus on the results right now. That is to say, at this stage of your study, it's still too early to be saying, well, I got X number of my multiple choice questions correct, therefore I'm going to pass or fail the exam. No, not yet. And certainly not in our course. It's way too early for that. But if you're in a big box bar review and you've been going through the cram of 6 or 7 weeks, you are way, way too early for that. And you shouldn't be focused on results. No matter what you're hearing from the people in that course or the people on either side of you in the room, that is not where your focus should be. Focus on results right now can only serve to disappoint and discourage and frustrate you. You don't take the bar exam today. You don't need to be passing today. And yet, an awful lot of people at this stage put their focus on the results, and they're just not ready yet. And the result of putting their focus on results before they're ready is bad stuff. You begin to feel like you're less than, you're not capable, you can't pass the bar because look at the work I'm doing today, and it's not passing quality. I have a shocker for most of you. Virtually no one does passing quality work 30 days before the exam. Really. I can almost guarantee in the big box bar review, virtually no one's doing passing quality work because most of those folks haven't gotten through even 50% of the subjects yet. And I would certainly say in our course, very few people are doing passing quality work even with 30 days to go, even if they've gotten through all the subjects, because you need that last period of time to refine, to tighten, and to move to the last passing level. So don't put your focus on what the results are right now, whether it's an essay, a multiple choice question, a performance test, it just doesn't matter. Results are not the point 30 days out. And certainly, I think this goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. If you're taking the exam in July 2017, there is no way in the world you should be thinking about any of this in terms of results right now. Totally not something you should be thinking about. All right, so I don't want you to focus on trivia. I don't want you to focus on the irritants, and I don't want you to focus on results. So I think it's probably safe to say, what would you like me to focus on, Jackson? Because now you're really beginning to tick me off. Okay, I got that. It's the great thing about bar takers at 30 days. They lose all sense of social propriety, which is why I love podcasts, because I can make up the things you're saying to me without actually having to hear them. But I know what you're thinking. All right, here's what I do think you should focus on in terms of vision. Number one, you need to focus on the big picture. Now, this is perfectly consistent with what we were saying about passion. The big picture is certainly about what happens post-bar, but I'm now talking about the vision of your studies in the big picture. What is it that you're trying to learn right now? And for most of you, what this will mean is one of two things. You're either acquiring new information, that is, you're going through subjects you've not yet seen, and that's the big picture. You're just trying to acquire that information. Or you've been through most, if not all, of the subjects that are on your exam, and now you're beginning to fine-tune and discover the things within those subjects where you feel most uncomfortable, where you feel weakest, where you feel like you're just not really ready on that particular part of that subject. That's what I mean by big picture. It's looking at where your study time can produce the biggest dividend for you. And sometimes to get that view, you have to step back a little bit. You've got to ask yourself, well, where am I generally in the process? Am I still at the point where I've really got to be grinding and pushing my way through subject matter? Okay, then that's what I'll do right now. That's the most important thing for maybe the next 2 or 2.5 weeks. But if you've already gotten through most of that study, now the big picture is I really want to start consolidating what I've learned. I want to make sure that I've built good habits around writing, around performance tests, around taking multiple choice exams. And so this is the time for me to focus on those skills and getting better in those particular areas. If you focus on the big picture right now, you find your studies are much more effective. And I think for a lot of people, this is really nothing other than just taking a breath, pushing back from the study table, at least metaphorically, and saying, where am I? What's happening? And what is it that I want to be doing? And I think if you're doing that, you're going to see much better outcomes as you study, and ultimately better at the end, obviously, on the exam. But the big part of vision, the thing I've saved for last, the thing that I think you absolutely have to have a vision for today is a vision for the process of studying rather than the results. You see, we talked just a moment ago about what happens when you focus on results at this stage. It's nothing but frustration and typically disappointment and anger. It can play out in a lot of negative ways. But if you focus on process, then the absolute change is that now you're looking at where you are relative to where you were. And what I mean by that is that now you start seeing and looking for constant improvement. And constant improvement is a process. It's not an event. In my experience, most people don't go from failing to passing overnight. It just doesn't happen. They don't go from getting a significant number of questions wrong to getting a significant number of questions correct in a single step. It happens, rather, in a step-by-step process, a step-by-step basis. And that happens by following a process. Now, if you're in our course, we've laid out a very clear process for you to follow. And as you know, I'm pretty rigid about saying follow that process. If you're studying on your own, maybe you don't have a process to follow. And so I would invite you to think about what it is you want to accomplish and how you're going to move forward in your studies over the next period of time. And if you're really struggling, we're going to put a link in our show notes. We've got a free a book called How to Study for the Bar Exam, and it'll give you some tips about that process that I think you might be able to incorporate. If you're in another bar review, or you're working with a tutor or someone that's got a side hustle teaching the bar, then I think you should ask them, what's your process? What's the process we should be following right now? And whatever that process is, that's what you've signed up for. That's what you've bought into. Do that process. Now, I may not agree with that process. I've said that elsewhere. But you should follow the process that you signed up to follow. That's the wisest course of action, certainly this close to the exam. And when you focus on process rather than results, what you begin to see is that there's gradual improvement in almost every case. By getting a little better on this essay than the last one, by doing a little better on the multiple choice questions than you were doing previously, by beginning to understand the areas in a particular subject that maybe you were having trouble with a week ago or a month ago or 6 months ago. That is what we mean by process. My experience has been that when bar takers focus on process with 30 days to go, they're happier, they're more productive, and they literally get more done. And I think ultimately that's really what you want, is to get more done. But you don't want to do busy work. You don't want to do things that don't make you feel better, that don't get you closer to your goal. And so process gives you the way to move towards that goal in a systematic, organized, disciplined manner. And frankly, I think it's one of the big advantages to being in a well-vetted, well-prepared, and successful bar review course like ours. I really think for those of you that are studying on your own, process is probably the hardest part to really get a handle on, because it's tough to know what to do. And so I hear from people in that position who say, well, I'm just reading old bar essays, or I'm reading old questions, or I'm doing practice questions. You know, it's not much of a process. And the result of not doing it and doing it in a scattershot, haphazard, random way is that you have a random result. And for most people, the random result is not very good. So one of the things you absolutely want to try and do is to get some coherent strategy to the way you're studying, at least for these last 30 days. Now, if you're studying for a later exam, there is no doubt that you need a process, and you should get started with that process as soon as possible. The longer you wait, the longer you delay, the harder it is to implement that process. And frankly, if you put it in place early, it's much easier at this point, at the end of your study, to simply follow all those steps that you've been following, and I think you'll see a change and a better result. So that's what it comes down to in my view. It's both passion and vision. If you want to have a successful week of study right now, I think you need to have passion for what you're doing. You have to know why passing the bar would change your life, why you're doing this. And you need to have a vision that encompasses the big picture and the process that you're following. You do those two things, and I think you're going to be just fine on the exam. Well, I hope that's helpful to you. I'm glad that you shared some of your time and your day with me today. I invite, as always, your comments and questions. And I would really encourage you, if you've not been a subscriber to our podcast, please do so. You can go to iTunes or iHeartRadio and subscribe there. You can also go to our website, and on our website at celebrationbarreview.com, there's a link for podcasts, and you can find all of our past episodes, all 129 or so up to today, plus the show notes, and I encourage you to do that. And we'd love your honest rating and review for any of these episodes or for the series as a whole. It really helps me know what people are looking for. Well, next week we'll come back and pick up again. We're going to keep going with our study strategies and pick up part 4. And I think you're going to be surprised at some of the things that we're suggesting as we move through this last period of 30 days. But I wish all of you a really productive, successful week of study. And as always, I'll see you on the pass list.
Thanks for listening to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers at www.celebrationbarreview.com.